how do Alabama and Florida State approach their new quarterbacks and to a certain degree their new systems? Remember, Gus Malzahn is now the offensive coordinator, no longer a head coach, not at Auburn, not at UCF, but the offensive coordinator for Florida State. And Kalen DeBoer has reunited with a familiar face in Ryan Grubb, who is his offensive coordinator, was his offensive coordinator at Washington, went to be with the Seattle Seahawks in the NFL last year. They parted ways because it didn't work out, and now he's back with Kalen DeBoer, this time at Alabama. That is an intriguing question in my mind, because both of these offenses, while Alabama has more experience and more returning production, they're top 25 there. Florida State's not even close to that. Florida State brought in more transfers. There is, I think, more intrigue and questions on the offense for both of these teams than on defense. Let's check out these teams and some of what they were last season. That's all we have to go off of right now, so I think that's an appropriate place to start. Alabama's margin of victory in terms of points per play was 0.237, which means they scored 0.237 more points per one of their plays compared to one of their opponent's plays. Before we resume this segment, please take a few seconds of your time to make sure you have liked the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for the channel and for any team podcasts and playlists linked in the description, and also comment your thoughts down below in the comment section and join my Discord server via the description. All of those things I just asked you to do are completely free, and they sign you up for things related to my channel, or they don't sign you up for anything. No cost to you, and all the benefit to you because we release daily college football content here on College Football with Sam. If you want to support the channel monetarily, sign up for a YouTube membership or check any other links in the description for my merchandise store and Patreon page. Thank you very much, and let's get back to the segment. Means they were one of the best teams in the country. To be a 0.2 or higher in that category, Florida State's was a negative 0.228. They were one of the worst in all of America, and they had the worst points per play offense in all of America, only scoring 0.199 points per play offensively. That is insanely low when you think about a game full of 3s and 7s. That is how you score. Occasionally you get the 2, occasionally maybe you can get that, 1-point safety or whatever that's called, but almost exclusively you score in 7s and 3s. 8s are more often than 2s. 2s are far more often than 1s. 1s almost never happen, don't even happen every season. You get the gist. To be that bad, to only score a fifth of a point per play is preposterous, especially when you consider Florida State did not play an SEC schedule, or they did not play a Big Ten schedule. They played a schedule that, from my recollection, wasn't even one of the hardest schedules in their own conference. It was probably easier than Georgia Tech's, who had to play Miami and who also had to play Notre Dame and Georgia. It was not the hardest in the ACC either. Alabama, their offense was viewed as pedestrian at the end of the year by their own fans, scored 0.492 points per play. And then defensively, Florida State was in the 0.4s, very poor, but not as poor as their offense. And Alabama's defense was in the top 10 in points per play allowed, just like how their offense was in the top 10 of points per play gained. These are two very different teams physically. You can see that in as something as simple and sometimes misguided as points per play, but usually towards the end of the year, points per play is very indicative of who the best team is. I think ever since 2019, if not beforehand, the number one team at the end of the year in points per play is also the national champion, usually the best team in the country by a wide margin. Here, it's very clear, it's very, very clear why Alabama is a 13.5-point favorite. And it's a game that kicks off at 3:30 Eastern time. 82 degrees Fahrenheit is the predicted temperature, but we're pretty far off from that, and 7-mile-per-hour winds. So Alabama, being a team that has elite wide receivers like Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, Isaiah Horton, you'd think that they, along with what they have coming back, would have a massive advantage. And the power ratings say that. Alabama per FPI would be favored by about 20.5 points over Florida State neutral field. That translates to about 17.5 once you factor in home field advantage. So per FPI, this line is actually very short. And Alabama has so many X factors compared to Florida State. Wide receiver, they're elite. On the defensive line, I like what they have. Same with linebacker, but I think in this matchup, it's more important their defensive line is dominant than their linebackers are, just by nature of how Florida State is more so limited at skill positions than offensive line, in my perspective, or at least from my perspective. And their defensive backs are loaded too. For Florida State, the only thing I see them having a real impact along with great players is the defensive line. Florida State has some good defensive linemen. So Daniel Lyons and Darrell Jackson Jr. and also Deontay McCray make up a deep defensive tackle unit. And they got James Williams starting at edge for them, incoming transfer from Nebraska. But Alabama, we already mentioned the receivers here. They have a guy named Caden Proctor at tackle, who I think will be really good this year. You also got to pay attention to Jaden Roberts and Parker Brailsford. Looking at their defense, Tim Keenan III is one of the better D tackles in America, and Deontay Lawson's the same at linebacker. Bray Hubbard, Keon Sabb, Deshaun Jones, Zabian Brown, and Damani Jackson are their starting 5 at defensive back. Extremely talented starting 5. So the key storyline for this game in sum is how can Florida State overcome all these disadvantages? And the storylines for both teams are, is Alabama's offense ready? Because if it is, Florida State's not winning this game. But that's not a given either. With the amount of turnover they have, it's a game that's on the road, and they're starting a new quarterback in his first ever start, and it's on the road. And can Florida State field a Power 4 team? Because even if Alabama's offense isn't ready, if Florida State looks anything like they did last year, if they are anything similar, they're dead on arrival. They are walking out to their own assassination. Game control is, I think, the biggest factor in this matchup if those two questions can be adequately answered, especially in favor of Florida State. Florida State will want to run the ball with Thomas Castellanos and with an offensive line that is filled with transfers, is transfer laden, but has Luke Petitbon, who was good in the ACC at Wake Forest, Micah Pettis, incoming transfer from Ole Miss. They have some size there, and Thomas Castellanos can run the football pretty effectively, as we saw at Boston College. So I think that Florida State's game plan here is going to be to try and slow the game down, keep Alabama's offense off the field. Can they do that? It's a huge question. In Simpson's first start, is he rattled? Does he take command? And also, how does that relate to Florida State's mentality? I can see Florida State treating this game in a, hey, we can win and we want to win, but we also would rather be healthy and be competitive in the ACC than sell out for a non-conference game. There's also the mentality that maybe you want to earn this win more than anything else, and you sell out and give your best game of the year in week 1 so that you can give some job security to your coach and confidence to your team as they have to go through the ACC stretch, where they play both Miami and Clemson, the favorites to win the conference. What about the offensive cohesion? Which unit has fewer mistakes, as there is a lot of newness here? Alabama's quarterback situation was the only problem they faced last year. They will tell you that their offensive line was a little inconsistent, that receiver, a lot of it was because of Milroe, but at times disappeared last year. Defense has really figured out this offense, large part because of Milroe, but I'm not saying everything else was perfect either. And as for Florida State, the unit was a mess, and they have a lot of new pieces. If it rains, that's another key factor. It should rain later in this game. As the game goes on, the rain should get heavier. It's projected that thunderstorms will occur in Tallahassee during this game. That would benefit Florida State, at least I think, because I think that Alabama will want to pass the ball better and be a team that will try to lean more towards the pass, especially since Jam Miller's injured. And this offensive line for Alabama returns more, and not just more production in general, but also better production on the outside than it does on the inside. So those are some things to pay attention to. I think that Alabama has favorable matchups just about everywhere. So their passing offense, rushing offense, passing defense, and rushing defense, I think is slightly better than Florida State's everywhere in matchups. That piles on. At times that can pile on exponentially, where if in just 2 of those areas you had an edge, but the others were a push, it could be competitive, and the team that has the advantages pulls away. However, if you have a little bit of an advantage everywhere over your opponent, that accumulates to being a massive advantage overall. That is what I see here as Alabama in every way. Pass defense, pass offense, lines of scrimmage, running the football, stopping the run, special teams, coaching staff, and overall talent tell me that Alabama's better in all of those areas compared to Florida State. And in terms of coaching staff and especially talent, they have a massive, massive advantage. I think the only way Florida State even has a chance of winning this game is sort of a Ohio State-Nebraska situation last year, or an Ole Miss-Kentucky situation, where I don't know what went on in those games. I don't know whatsoever. But for whatever reason, Nebraska played Ohio State competitively, and Kentucky played Ole Miss competitively. And a lot of that had to do with those teams being weak on the line of scrimmage, either in that game and offensively. Defensively, those teams were never weak on the line of scrimmage, but offensively weak on the lines in that moment or throughout the entire season, such as Ole Miss was. So is Alabama going to be that this Saturday? That's going to answer whether Florida State even has a chance or not. And I think that Simpson and also his offensive line and the offense overall, it is week one. It is on the road. I do think there will be some shakiness, and 13.5 points is a lot, especially when Florida State, I think, has a game plan that is very workable. Run the ball for probably 3 or 4 yards per carry. The offensive line should be better. They should have competent running back play, and Castellanos is really fast, and he can run the ball and take hits several times per game, and it's week one, so he's totally healthy. He's not worn down yet. So I like Florida State here to cover, but I do not like Florida State to win it all. It's very similar to me to Cincinnati, Nebraska. Not quite as close. I think that Cincinnati is much closer to Nebraska than Florida State is to Alabama, where I'm picking the underdogs to cover, but I have a very hard time envisioning Cincinnati winning. It's the same thing with Florida State here. I think that Florida State will cover more so because it's slow-paced, rather than at any point in the game it looks like they are going to win, and at no point will Florida State look like the superior team, respectfully. I think that Alabama has far better coaching, talent, better players. I wouldn't be shocked if every Alabama player were to be a starter on Florida State's roster. Like every Alabama starter would be a starter for Florida State. So no Florida State player would start for Alabama. I wouldn't be shocked at that at all, honestly. So picking Alabama to win, picking Florida State to cover, it's just that simple. Mike Norvell and Florida State have to show me. They have to show you. Until then, I'm not going to lie, I kind of view them as frauds, and I think that's very understandable given what transpired in 2024. Thank you for watching College Football with Sam. Make sure that you've liked the video, subscribed to the channel, hit the notification bell for the channel and team playlists and podcasts in the description, join the free Discord server where we talk college football 24/7, and have commented your thoughts down below. Check out the description for any ways you can support the channel monetarily. Everything else I've asked you to do is completely free, and your support means the world to me. We're trying to become the next big thing on college football YouTube. 6-figure subscribers, maybe 1 million one day. I think we can do that. And also check out any videos or playlists, anything in these columns right here, where there will be videos and playlists. Yeah, you get the point. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one.